Hello and welcome to Film Obsessive. I'm Paul Johnson. I'm here today interviewing Will Hart, who is director of the new documentary Lead and Copper, and who's generous enough to take time from his busy schedule to speak with us. So, Will, where are you and what are you working on at the moment?
Right now, I am in Brooklyn, New York, but I'm working on shooting behind the scenes of a horror movie, and I can't say which one. But it's going to be probably coming out sometime next year. It's very different than what I usually work on.
That's exciting. I hope you navigate the snow and the weather there okay. We should probably talk about Lead and Copper, a film that I recently reviewed and which is just out now. It explores the Flint Water Crisis of about a decade ago. I'm just going to ask you to take us back in time to how you came to the topic and what your experience was there.
Yeah, so in 2016, around about 8 years ago, almost to the week, I was sent to Flint for Yahoo News. I used to be a freelance video journalist, and I was there for a week and a half, 2 weeks. And I was covering the Flint water crisis, and there was so much information and a plethora of issues that were going on that were related to the Flint water crisis and aided why their water was contaminated. And it really motivated me to and enraged me really to be to want to do a bigger piece and to want to do more stories. And so with a little bit of luck and some help from my friends Alex and Pat, we got some very very low funds together and started this feature, basically going back and interviewing the same people that I interviewed for this Yahoo piece. And that's how the movie started. We went back to Flint from New York, probably, I don't know, a dozen times or so. I lived in Detroit for a little bit to do a lot of principal photography. And yeah, that's how the movie got made. It was really a labor of love and a very, very small crew.
Labor of love, and it sounds like no small amount of anger there as
Yeah.
well as what was happening in Flint. So your some of your principal subjects and interviewees like Janae Young and Leanne Walters, those are folks that you knew from the first moments really there on the ground in Flint back in 2016, or did you come to them a little later?
I met Leanne a little bit later. I first met her husband actually at a Virginia Tech water sampling distribution center in 2016, right on our first trip. And then it wasn't until probably a year later that we interviewed Leanne. But Janae Young, Leon El Amin, and Tim Mateen, we met almost in my first trip. I think it was either my first day or my second day there. I knew a few people just from hanging around after shooting these Yahoo pieces at a bar near my hotel, and the bartenders and my friends I made there were like, "Oh, you should go to my friend Janae," or "Oh, you should go talk to Leon." And that's how we met. It was just showing up and be like, "Hey, what's going on? Can you sit down?" And their presence in the film morphed from there.
It feels really important from a viewer's perspective to be able to latch on to those firsthand stories of how individuals were impacted. I also imagine that there were others involved in the crisis who had very little interest in speaking to a documentary filmmaker about their role. And I'm just wondering, did you also try to speak with like the emergency manager, the governor of Michigan at that time, other state and local officials, and just what those efforts were like?
Yeah, I have two anecdotes. So we obviously tried to speak with the emergency manager. We tried to speak with the Howard Croft, the public works director. We got close to maybe getting Howard Croft, I think, at one point. It never happened. Emergency managers never reached out, never responded to any reach out. The governor, Rick Snyder, former governor Rick Snyder, never responded. We did have an interview with former Governor Rick Snyder's uh, treasurer, chief, but his interview was very in the weeds, and while it would have been revelatory in some ways or another, it would have been very difficult to explain how we got there, or how or why we were interviewing him. And then we tried to interview a lot of congressional members who you could see towards the end of the film when they did the oversight committee. And we got a lot of Democrats, obviously. Elijah Cummings was fantastic, Brenda Lawrence, Eleanor Holmes Norton. Um, but Jason Chaffetz and all the Republicans did not want to be interviewed. I walked into Jason Chaffetz's office in Congress, and they didn't. They quickly asked me to leave. So yeah, it was interesting navigating who wanted to be interviewed, and there were also former EPA officials that we interviewed who were there during the writing of the Lead and Copper Rule, who were not, were not happy to be involved, or came in expecting to dismiss all the claims that lead was that big of an issue in water quality, or in water across the country. And I wish I could have integrated those interviews into the documentary, but it would have we would have had to explain a lot more, and the doc would have been very, very long.
Okay, and I recognize that's always an important part in documentary filmmaking, is keeping the length of it manageable, especially when there are, so many diverse materials, and also keeping it focused. I suppose you could always Errol Morris one of your interviewees and sandbag them with a little bit of quirky music or a little bit of a late cut or something like that. But I did
There
just
was
want to
a
ask
cut
you.
like that. Yeah, there was an edit like that at one point. I don't think it'll see the light of day, but who knows?
Fair enough. I also just wanted to ask quickly, you mentioned that the one interview was kind of in the weeds, I think was the phrase that you used. Can you just explain what you meant there?
Yeah, there is a lot of policy that goes, and bureaucracy that goes behind switching a a municipality's water supply from one source to the other. What happened, and what happened with the switch over to the Flint River, which was a catalyst to creating the contamination and the lead poisoning. Um, and there was a document that possibly this is kind of conjecture, but it possibly circulated, that would have proved that uh, they didn't want to spend money on treating the water at the water plant. But after we did that interview and we couldn't find the exact document, and we basically didn't have the paper. We basically didn't have enough of the evidence. We found that we didn't want to include it in the film.
It's still in the end, I think, such a clear account of the events in Flint. I kind of wish I'd been able to share it, your film, with my students back when I was teaching Dr. Mona Hanna Atisha's book on the matter. I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit generally too about some of the challenges of working with such a diverse set of materials for a documentary. You've got your own interviews, you've got pieces of legislation, you've got a lot of archival footage, you've got what I imagine must be a pretty dense thicket of bureaucracy to navigate. What are some of the challenges in trying to put that together and really make it a very coherent and causal narrative?
That was the hardest part. Um, uh, we could have made this movie in a way where someone was just narrating everything, But it was very important to me that we showed the exact evidence of what was pointing to what was pointing one domino setting up the other and the mole knocking down, right? I have to give a shout out to Ryan Felton at The Guardian, who requested a FOIA release from MDEQ in Michigan and EPA that had a plethora of emails and data and analysis, as well as Virginia Tech, released their own um, information and their own data sets and their own emails that they had collected. And former EPA Miguel del Toro, who released information to ACLU with Leanne Walters. So there was so much to go through already. And then, so, that pointed to how the crisis got made and how it was tried, how the crisis started and how it was attempted to be swept under the rug. But then on top of that, we needed to really explain to an audience what, things like corrosion control was and how bad lead poisoning is and why are there lead pipes in general. And we think of lead pipes, we think of lead, I think now, as a very toxic material, but when it was being utilized throughout communities being built, and even back in the Roman times, we didn't know that, right? So there was a lot of scientific and water chemistry research that I had to personally do because I'm a filmmaker. I did very bad in chemistry in high school, but yeah, it was just a lot of education. I read a lot of books, read a lot of papers, talked to a lot of people, and it also came out of doing interviews with scientists across the country and learning from them, and then being like, okay, cool, I can explain what you explained to me in a different way, but now I need to simplify that for an audience and edit that into the movies. So it was a task, and I think we did an okay job.
I think you did an excellent job with it. I'm
Thank
I'm
you.
wondering, are there models or influences or other documentary films or filmmakers that really inspire you or that you look to when you're thinking about your own work?
Yeah, it might sound weird, but there's this documentary by Werner Herzog called Lessons of Darkness, and it's about the Kuwait War and the invasion of Kuwait, I think. It's hard to tell what it's actually about because it's just like aerial footage of the aftermath of this huge invasion in the Middle East that we did. And I was transfixed by that movie when I first saw it and I started letting copper. And I really liked the idea of having this just like scope of everything. In his movies, in Herzog's movies, I feel like you see everything on the screen and it's told to you in a way that just is like very matter of fact. And I know it's a little bit rehearsed, but I wanted to kind of incorporate that. And then, people like Alex Gibney, who just are so well researched and go beyond documentary filmmaking into investigative journalism is like he's a huge role model to me because I wish I could just be that sort of detective and follow one injustice for months and months and months at a time, and discover as much as possible. So I think those two are my big guys. But then it's uh Harlan County, I think, was another great doc that I was like, oh, when we were building the edit, I looked back at that movie for how do we show the people who are bringing the Flint Water Crisis to the light as heroes and as people who are in charge of their own destiny. And I looked at Harlan County as how to do that because that's an incredible documentary about West Virginia and the coal miners there.
Those are all great examples, and it makes me want to ask, Did you see them, and are those films that like inspired you to become a documentary filmmaker, or was documentary filmmaking something that was always on the cards, always in the cards for you? And then as you're developing, you're looking to others to kind of hone your own instincts and abilities.
Yeah, I don't really know if I've always wanted to do documentaries. I like doing them. I did some when I was in high school that were like okay. And when I was just starting out in college too, but I think that the my emotional and my reaction to the Flint Water Crisis and this after going there was really what pushed me and motivated me and Alex and Pat to want to make a documentary out of this. I think that there could have been, had Yahoo sent me to another place to cover another injustice, something else could have uh, motivated me even more. But I have other documentary ideas I would love to do. And I'm still researching them right now. But I think when I was growing up and when I started becoming a filmmaker, I don't know if I always wanted to become a documentarian because it is daunting and it's honestly a little scary to tell someone else's story and and I don't even like saying those words like it's just daunting to be like, okay, this is about real people and I really hope they like it. Thankfully, I think everyone who's in the movie, who has seen the movie Link Copper has really enjoyed it, but it wasn't until I showed it to them and it was done that that those fears didn't go away. That was a very, very important to me is that everyone in Flint who's seen it and everyone in Newark who's seen it um liked it, and even and Dr. Mark Edwards liked it. If they didn't like it, if there was an issue with it, I would have thought the film was a failure. So everything that the document, everyone's accolades or everyone's reviews and what people are saying about the movie now, I'm very happy about. But my biggest goal was to make sure that everyone who was in it was like, okay, yeah, this is exactly what happened. Thank you for making this, or you didn't get anything wrong. That was a big fear of mine.
That's really fascinating to hear. And I mean, I see a lot and review a lot of documentaries, and one of the first things I'll acknowledge is it's easier to make a bad documentary than it is a good one. And as I'm sure you know, they can go wrong in a lot of different directions. I'm wondering, since most of the events that are covered in the film take place, well, now nearly 10 years ago, what you are thinking about making that film at this particular historical moment, post-COVID, if you feel like the Flint water crisis is something that is, should we say, quote, resolved, for lack of a better word, and what, if anything, we have learned from it.
Right. So the official word from people that at Virginia Tech and um, and from the state of Michigan is that not like 95% of Flint's pipes have been replaced. Now, I don't really think that matters. I think that because the citizens of Flint have been were lied to for 2 years, I don't think that they can ever trust their water again, and rightfully so. I don't know if I was poisoned if my water was poisoned, and I kept on saying, to my city officials and to my state officials, something's wrong, and they kept on saying, no, 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 it's okay. And then they finally admitted that it was poisoning kids. If I would ever drink water again, so I think that the issue is beyond scientific or technicalities. It's all about like gaining the trust back. And post COVID, and I think a big reason why when we interviewed Mayor Ras Baraka and Kareem Nadeem from Newark, they that was in the middle of COVID and they were wearing masks. And there was a part of me that was hesitant to wait until possibly the pandemic subsided a little bit, and maybe they would go on camera without their masks. But I think that I think that COVID and the pandemic in general has shown how there are cracks in our infrastructure beyond the literal infrastructure, and cracks in our healthcare system, and what is important to our government in some ways. If if the state government of Michigan really cared about Flint at the time that the water issues were getting bad and people were experiencing health problems, then they would have looked into it more. And I think we saw similar reaction to how our government is reacted to coronavirus, and how some people reacted to coronavirus. And so that's why I included it in the documentary. And I think, if anything, if I could tie COVID to Lead and Copper at all, it's that it's eerily similar in some of the reactions and some of the ways that state officials and federal officials downplayed how serious a problem was. And at the end of the day, it's like, if you're just trying to keep people safe and healthy, why don't we put a little bit more effort into keeping people safe and healthy, especially our children? I don't understand the mental gymnastics that go behind that, and that like counterintuitive thinking that's like, no, it's okay, we can be wanton about how bad lead in your water is. It's like, you can't. The communities who are experiencing lead poisoning are mostly people of color, and communities of color, mostly low income. And so the lead poisoning is already on top of all these other issues that they're experiencing on a day-to-day. They don't have access to good grocery stores. They don't have good public transit. I think that my goal of the movie, and I don't know if I was completely successful with it, is to show that water is just one thing that we need to exist. And once that's contaminated, it kind of shows that there are other problems going on.
Well put. I was going to ask what ideally you hoped documentary can do. Like what can good documentary filmmaking accomplish? I think that's clearly part of it. Is there more you'd like to add there?
Yeah, I think it's important for documentaries to tell how people can combat the oppression that they're facing. And I also think it's extremely important, and I wish more documentaries that were popular today did this, is to inform the audience as to, as it kind of feel like it's a little bit boring to say, but like to maybe give them a little bit of a history or a science lesson behind why this is happening. Because if you then understand, the history and the science behind a specific issue, then it's easier for you to comprehend other issues beyond that. And you can kind of be like, oh, okay, well, General Motors left Flint, so there wasn't as much money coming into the community. So that's why, you have those dominoes, as I said earlier, that are set up that make the audience understand, as opposed to them walking away with more questions, or walking away just really upset or really scared about what exists in their own country. I love a lot of documentaries, but I'm afraid that some are just here to scare us and just here to make us sad, as opposed to give us the information that we need to put everything into context.
Thanks, Will. And where and when can people see Lead and Copper?
We're figuring that out. There's a few festivals that we're going to announce, but we're still talking to a bunch of different distributors. But if you reach out to us on our website, we can tell you directly what the local film festival you'll be able to see it at, or what local screening you'll be able to see it at.
Excellent. I'll include those links in my review, in my interview as well, Will. And I'll just say thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us at Film Obsessive. I hope Lead and Copper gains the widest audience possible, and I wish you every bit of luck with your future filmmaking. Thank you again.
Thank you very much. This is an excellent interview, and it's your wonderful review.
Thank you, Will.